KVFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. If you'd like to join the program, of course, it's 515-955-1400. And you can certainly join us. Audio and video and StreamYard, that's on my Facebook page, Michael Devine. It's on the AM 1400 KVFD Facebook page, or it's at the Alpha Media website. That's Alpha Media Fort Dodge. You can check this out. And it's just a picture of an old raging guy in a radio station studio. But I like to think I'm fun, too. Hey, I'm fun. And we're broadcasting live from the Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters studio. Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters is at 612 South 32nd Street here in Fort Dodge. You may contact Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters by calling 576-6481. Okay, I've been looking for a definition of white supremacy. Now, I had a caller just as we ended in the last half hour rather, and we really couldn't figure it out other than when Joe Biden says the biggest threat to national security is white supremacy. Now, I tried to think of a female white supremacist, and the only one that I could come up with is that poor woman who got shot in the neck January 6th in Washington, D.C. There are boobs, and that's all they are. They're rural Americans like that guy from Arkansas, and I still love the picture. I got to get a picture of this guy from Arkansas sitting in Nancy Pelosi's chair with his feet up on her desk. I got to get that picture and blow it up poster size and put it in the studio. It's such a great go to hell poster. It would be a great go to hell poster. It would drive liberals nuts if any of them ever actually came into the studio, which they never actually do. But anyway, President Biden says the greatest threat to our country. Well, it wouldn't be nuclear war, I guess. It wouldn't be Russia or China or the constant war we have going on with jihadists, murderous jihadists in the Middle East. It's white supremacy. So again, the only female I could think of was that poor girl shot and killed, 32 years old, by an officer still unnamed. Now, we've got all these other guys in jail for God knows what. Trespassing. There's a couple of people that are in. There's a couple of people that are in jail now. They've been there for months, and they wound up getting charged with trespassing or making some plea deal on trespassing. This judge in Washington, D.C. is using the authority of her office to unjustly imprison a bunch of noisy guys and women who were not going to take over the country. They were not. I do not care what any liberal talking head says. They were not a direct threat to our democracy. Do you really think that guy with horns, that QAnon, whatever he was, and by the way, QAnon is nonsense. That QAnon, what did they call it? It was some Indian spiritual name. Oh, shaman. QAnon shaman, the guy with the big horns. I think he's still in jail for standing in the Capitol Rotunda, looking stupid. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I got to get away from that name calling. But I guess that's the atypical white supremacist in liberal minds, and they're just full of hate and bitterness. All the reports coming out of Washington, D.C., as far as the Democrats' attitude, they're still really stung about Donald Trump. They hate him intensely, and it's a problem in negotiations. It was a problem in the negotiations for the transportation bill, and I think we finally got done. Very little of it has to do with transportation, and more of it about feeding the people who elected Joe Biden president. Let me tell you again, Barack Obama was going around the country in early 2020 advocating for Elizabeth Warren. If that tells you anything about Joe Biden. Those people in the Democratic Party who are a lesser person than Barack Obama. I was not someone who thought Barack Obama was a direct threat to democracy. I thought he was a pretty conventional politician, And since you have to have a high level of charisma to lead the country, like Ronald Reagan did, like Bill Clinton did, like Barack Obama did. Barack Obama was even more than Bill Clinton, and Hillary Clinton wasn't even in the league. Barack Obama was probably the most significant president we've ever had in a number of ways. He was black, and he could lead. He was a very bright man and is a very bright man. And he used his intelligence and his association with Joe Biden, and he thought about it and came up with the idea, hey, Joe Biden shouldn't be president. Joe Biden shouldn't be the nominee. Elizabeth Warren should be. And by the way, Warren was my candidate. But of course, the people cannot speak to the Democratic Party. The people have no say in the Democratic Party. We found that out in 2016 when Bernie Sanders sued the party, claiming favoritism, and the Democratic Party came out and said, look, we're a private entity. We don't owe you anything. And that's the way they've governed. We're a private entity, and we don't owe you anything. But we will refer to you as white supremacists if only we could define it. It sounds dramatic, doesn't it? White supremacy. And Biden even gets that, I just love it when he tries to look tough. Yeah, I think he probably was a tough guy when he was younger, but he's going to be 79 here pretty soon. I just love that tough guy look he gets on his face when he says white supremacy or systematic racism. I bet he doesn't know the definition of either. I bet Joe Biden's a politician, and it happens to politicians of both parties a lot. Their people present them with position papers, but they really don't know what the hell they're talking about. People have tried. You've seen this on television if you watch the news like I do. Biden will get up and say something like that, and reporters, and he turn around and leave the podium, and reporters will start shouting at him, what's white supremacy? What's your definition? And a number of other questions, of course. He won't tell them. He won't respond to them because he doesn't know. He doesn't really have a definition. He knows it's racist. That's the way I describe. If you ask me what a white supremacist is, I'd say a no-holds-barred racist. And I don't have any racists in my little sphere, in my little world. I don't put up with that in my life. And here's the big surprise. I'm an older white man. I've been around a long time, and most of the people I know are older white people. We don't allow the N-word when we're in our private conversations. We don't make racist jokes. We did back in the 70s. And then they were few and far between. Because we grew up. We realized these stereotypes were ugly and false, and they weren't funny. Polish jokes was a big deal back then, if you recall. We didn't do those things. But here we are, 45 years later, and somebody like Joe Biden, who opposed school busing and opposed abortion, has the audacity to come out to a podium and address us like we're scum. Address us like we're just beneath him and all his little cabal there in Washington, D.C. As they try, and you heard Joni Ernst a little while ago. They want to federalize elections. That's a states' rights thing. No, states' rights isn't a dirty word. I know it was used by Southerners 150 years ago to justify slavery, but there is no justification for slavery. There's none. So, to make liberals feel good, and liberals are apparently can only feel good when they're self-flagellating. Now, for those of you out there who don't know what I just said, self-flagellating is not obscene. It means you constantly beat yourself and others like you. You flog yourself. You hit yourself. Hollywood celebrities, you ought to chase down their trivia accounts. Roseanne Arquette, get hers. She's beautiful. She just hates herself for being white. She regrets being white deeply. And the privilege, she's just so sorry about the privilege she's endured. Well, I got it. Here, Rosanna, and all the other people who think that way, who are liberals, give up all your possessions and go wander the earth seeking truth and salvation. Get your knapsack out. Move out of your Hollywood Hills home there, Ms. Arquette. Give all your possessions away give away your fine cars, all those things, just as a start. In fact, invite black people in. Well, I shouldn't even say black people. Invite communities of color into your house and have them strip it to the bare walls. Take everything. Take everything. That's just the start. And then, and I would suggest this for a few people here in Fort Dodge who are always crying. And in the, always in the lotus position, always navel gazing, always thinking of reasons to hate somebody with less money than they do. Or less education than they do. It's a class prejudice, and it's as ugly as any other prejudice, including racism. And that's who runs the Democratic Party. But yeah, I would suggest this for any liberal who is complaining about how terrible they feel about their privilege. I never had much personally, and came from a group of boys who didn't have anything. And we all made it through life. We worked hard and we persevered. I know it was easier for us than it was for any black person. I know that. And I'd like to do something about it. But I, by God, am not going to stand still and have some smug school board tell me that I have to sit by while grandchildren are being taught to hate themselves because of their privilege. Because of their privilege. Life's hard on us all. Get off it. Maybe we could, well, no, the time has passed. We can't work together at all anymore. The idea of reaching across the aisle or building coalitions or any of that is over with. Frankly, watch liberals bearing gifts with smiles on their faces. What they're trying to do is get close to you and tip you over. Because they always got that agenda up their sleeve, that hateful ideology that is woke culture. They always have that up their sleeve. They're humorless people, and they really mean no one any good. They're there to be, as they always. Richard Daley, when he was a mayor of Chicago, he was a king of patronage, and we had a lot of patronage, and still do in Fort Dodge. Patronage is essentially putting Democrats in public office, minor public office, of course, nothing too serious. Putting Democrats in public office or city jobs, county jobs, that sort of thing. That's patronage. That's how Democratic politicians and Democrats in general work. There was a better time. When Democratic politicians stood up for working people. They were the party of working people. That's long ago and far away now. That was the Fort Dodge that we all knew and loved. And it was destroyed by Ronald Reagan and liberals. What a 1-2 punch that is. What a 1-2 punch. Like a lot of Democrats at the time, I wasn't happy. Ronald Reagan was a nice guy, and he was a remarkable person, as I mentioned earlier. When he was a lifeguard as a very young man, he saved 77 people from drowning. 77 people Ronald Reagan saved from drowning. And today was the first day I found out about that because the man never mentioned it. The man never mentioned it. He never sat there in the debate stage with Walter Mondale and said, how many people did you save? Because I saved 77. No, the man never mentioned it because he thought that was his job, that's what was expected of him. There were no Twitter accounts back then to rip him for grandstanding. Well, Ronald Reagan, he saved some people today, but he's just trying to get good publicity. We really know he's a terrible Republican. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is the first thing Ronald Reagan did was take on the unions and start busting up unions, and he did a great job, and that's to his eternal shame as far as I'm concerned. George Bush the first was elected then, and he was not as effective as Reagan, to say the very least. Although he did win the war, and the first Iraq War, and that alone should have guaranteed his reelection. But as history tells us now, George I was not reelected because he just couldn't take Bill Clinton and the pack of Arkansas hillbillies seriously. Big mistake. They worked hard and long and beat him. And by the way, I was one of those people working for Bill Clinton back then, advocating for Bill Clinton back then. And there was a big pushback from some of my Republican friends. And I do have Republican friends. Now I do have Republican friends, a lot of them. And I admire them for their accomplishments. But we had great hopes. People like me had great hopes who had seen the union jobs dissolve in Fort Dodge and our town plunged into poverty. What happened? What happened when the man from Hope became president of the United States? He did two things he never mentioned in his long campaign. They were first things out of the chute. First, it was gays in the military. Gays in the military. The pushback was so intense on Bill Clinton that he buckled and then put in that just say no. And the courts have changed the culture since then, so you have to be pro-gay. I think the Supreme Court one of these days is going to order us all to engage in some sort of gay sex just so we can appreciate how wonderful gay people are. I would, that's facetious, of course, but I really wouldn't doubt it at all. And then Bill Clinton did something even uglier. He passed NAFTA. That was the centerpiece of his economic program. Now, there was a man called Al Fromm, F-R-O-M, and he wrote a book how wonderful it was to jettison the unions in the 1980s to save the Democratic Party. Get rid of these unions, they're a drag. A return to power, he calls it. What sort of power and influence did Bill Clinton really use for the good of our country? Ronald Reagan saved 77 lives. Bill Clinton stood by and watched at least 600,000 Rwandans be hacked to death because he didn't want his poll numbers to fall. Think of that. Think of that. Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorite authors from the 1970s, used to say, think of that. He called himself Kilgore Trout. Well, here, I'll play Kilgore Trout today. Think of that. Think of what kind of man it takes, a kind of human being it takes to sit there and make excuses for your own inaction and lie about it. Well, I didn't know. Yes, he did. Michael Isikoff wrote an entire book about his lies surrounding Rwanda. You know, he's never really come clean on that. He's never really come clean. He knew from the start what was happening in Rwanda. And he tried to get some of the European countries involved, but they were too cowardly. So Bill thought to himself, apparently, hey, they're cowardly. I might as well be cowardly too. I dodged the draft, so I'm going to be, I'll just be as cowardly as they are. How can you respect people like that? How can you respect someone who stands by and lets that happen? Let's fast forward to Barack Obama. Bright red line. Oh, yeah, you use those chemical weapons, Assad in Syria. That's a bright red line. The United States will act. Oh, yeah. So Assad used chemical weapons, killed a bunch of people. And Obama publicly decided that he wasn't, and he came out with it. I like Barack Obama as a person, but as a leader, he's terrible, just terrible. 400,000 people died in Syria as the Assad government took control. They publicly said, we can do anything we want. The United States, the West isn't going to do anything, and he was absolutely correct. But Joe Biden says, we need to regain our moral leadership on the world stage after Trump. You see, Trump was bad. And here I am now, and we're going to regain our moral leadership on the world stage. Are the French thrilled now? Is the French government running around saying, oh my God, it has happened at last. Moral leadership has been restored to the United States because Trump, the French are some of the people who stood around and watched those Rwandans die. They knew more than anybody. Rwanda was one of their provinces back in the colonial days. So Biden's going to go over there and say, I'm here with my moral leadership now. you people who stood there and watched this brutality on a scale almost unheard of in history. I got to find I was trying to figure out a funny way to say this to make a point. Rush Limbaugh is really good at that, but I couldn't find one. The galling hypocrisy of these people. The galling hypocrisy. It's horrendous. It's 5 o'clock. Thank you for listening. I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully to talk with you in a better mood.
If you're into cars or just want to learn a thing or two, tune in every Saturday afternoon from 2 till 4 for the End of the Hood.